Hello everyone. Today I thought I'd make a video about living in Utah. This is a video that I've been meaning to make for a while now, and I just decided to push it back and wait a while before doing it. And today we're just finally going to film it, and I'm going to talk about my experiences living in Utah. So I'll be referencing my notes throughout this video to make sure I hit on everything I want to talk about. And I will say I've only been here for a few months, so I haven't been here long enough to know everything about Utah. I'm just going to share my experiences living here compared to where I lived before. So I know wherever you live, everyone thinks that they have the worst drivers. But I can tell you, having lived in Washington where I thought drivers were bad, the drivers here are way worse. I have never experienced so much bad driving on a daily basis. So first up, I'll just say that people honk for no reason because they're impatient. So before we moved here, we were visiting last July, and we were at a gas station. And we were turning left, so we had to get across all the lanes of traffic on this 5-lane road. And the lady in the car behind us wanted to turn right, okay? And the way that it's set up is there's only one lane in and one lane out, so there's not the separate turn lanes for which direction you're going. And we're yielding to traffic because we can't go yet, and the lady behind us is getting impatient and keeps honking at us because she wants to turn right, but we're trying to turn left. And it's like, I'm sorry, we can't just pull out in front of traffic and get hit when people are driving 40 miles per hour. So, people are very impatient here. Like, that's been happening all the time, situations just like that. Also, with like snow and ice on the roads, people on the freeways still drive 70 to 80 miles per hour. I know that my dad's seen a few accidents, people passing him at 80 miles per hour, and then later on he'll see them in a ditch on the freeway. And there's just no reason for that. People here are just so impatient. People are always riding my ass when I'm driving, even if I'm speeding slightly. It doesn't matter, like, everyone is just impatient to go nowhere. We always get stuck at the same red lights. I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, people here in Utah have no concept of following distance. And the speed limits are like 55 on the normal roads around here. Like the main roads out here, like 55 miles per hour, and people are right on you. Like, you're not gonna be able to stop if something happens. It's ridiculous. Like, everyone needs to go back to driver's ed in this state. So whenever you go to like a local restaurant around here, they have scones. From what I can tell so far, scones seem to be very popular here in Utah, but there's a problem with that. The scones here in Utah are not scones. So the day that we moved here, we ate at this place for breakfast in Layton, and they kept saying that they had the best scones. And I was looking around, seeing people get these scones, and I realized very quickly that they were actually elephant ears, as we would call them in Washington. So I ordered one. It tastes exactly like an elephant ear. It is an elephant ear. It's not a scone at all. Then we went to another place near our house, and once again, scones, so we thought we'd try them, and it was just fry bread. It's not actually a scone. I'm going to show a picture. These are what scones look like. So, Utah scones are not scones, and I don't even know why they're called scones or how that happened, but it's fry bread and or elephant ears, depending on where you go. Another thing I'll talk about is the alcohol laws here, because they're very different. It's very weird. So, the percentage of alcohol in drinks around here is very low compared to the rest of the country. I mean, we're talking like 3% in like beer. So you can only get regular alcohol in liquor stores, and there aren't very many of them, so obviously the state tries to make it very hard for you to access alcohol. Another thing that's interesting about alcohol here in Utah is the DUI blood alcohol limit is the lowest in the country. I'm fine with that because you really shouldn't be drinking and driving in the first place. I don't care if you've had one beer or not. You really shouldn't. But just the fact that like you can't get alcohol in the grocery store is weird. Especially not even like beer. Like the beer that you can get at a store is not actual beer. The percentage of alcohol is so low. Not that it affects me much. I don't really drink. It's just not something I think to do. So at restaurants here in Utah, there's a thing called fry sauce that everyone always orders, and some restaurants even just give it to you automatically, or they'll ask you like, oh, do you want some fry sauce with your fries? That's not something that was around a lot in Washington. Some places did have fry sauce. I have had it before moving here, but it's everywhere here in Utah that has fry sauce, and it's nothing special really. It tastes fine, but it's nothing special. So moving on to weather. The weather here is very extreme compared to Washington. So in Washington, it was very mild year-round. You would have your cold winters where it would snow, and you would see temperatures drop into the teens and stuff where we lived. And I'm talking Western Washington. Eastern Washington is a whole different story, along with the mountains. They can get hotter and colder temperatures than where I lived in Washington. But where I lived in Washington, temperatures were relatively mild. You saw winters where it would snow occasionally, but for the most part it just rained. And then in the summers it would stop raining, it would get really dry and really hot, and by that I mean 70s and 80s, the occasional 90s. But here in Utah, it's like the extremes. Like in the summer, from what I've experienced, which isn't much of the summer, but from what I experienced, it's really hot, like 90 degrees plus every day. And then in the winter, it's always sunny, and it seems like every week or every week and a half a storm comes through and dumps a little bit of snow. So it's really bizarre. Like, it's very cold here compared to Washington. It just stays cold. So, like in Washington, if it was to snow, it would be a very slushy, wet snow. And let's say like the last few years in Washington, we would at least once a year get a storm that dumped like 6, 7, 8 plus inches of snow. And it would snow, it'd be really wet, turn to slush the next day, and within a few days it would melt. Here in Utah, it'll just snow once a week or once every week and a half, and you'll get like an inch or 2 inches of snow on top of what you already have, and it just stays so cold, and it doesn't rain, and the snow just never melts. It just stays there, and then you get a few inches on top of it and a few inches on top of it. And it hasn't snowed in quite a few days, and there's still snow on the ground everywhere because it just doesn't melt. And the snow's different. Like I said, in Washington, it was really slushy, really wet snow. And here, it's a powder. It's really dry, and it just gets really icy as it sits there. So it's really different. Oh, and speaking about snow, the people around here that we've come in contact with seem to think that nowhere else gets snow or something, because they continuously ask us, like, oh, how are you liking the snow? What do you think of all the snow? What do you think of the winter? And it's like, we've seen snow before. It does snow in Washington. Like, Utah's not the only place that gets snow. It snows in the rest of the country, all over. So, snow is not unique to Utah. And it's just weird that a lot of people we've talked to seem to think that. So one thing that's really different for me about living here in Utah is the lack of rain. It really doesn't rain that often. It's not cloudy that often. It's usually sunny in all seasons. And it's either cold or hot, depending on the season. And you'll get storms that come through every now and then, dumping snow or rain, but it's not a lot. And, in Washington, most of the time in the fall, winter, and spring, it's going to at least rain or be cloudy. So that's something that's really different and that I have to get used to. And because of that, like this whole area, there's not a lot of vegetation. There's a lot of grass and a lot of little shrubs and small trees, but not at all what I'm used to. Not to say that there aren't trees in Utah. I was very surprised going into some of these canyons to see trees that I'm used to. Fir, pine, spruce trees, but they're all on the other side in these canyons, and it's interesting that they grow there but nowhere else. So like the lack of rain, there's just not as much vegetation. Nothing was really green when we were here in the summer. Everything was just brown, which is going to take a lot of getting used to. You know, coming from a place that's just luscious year-round to a place that's really dry. Also, something that's really interesting about Utah is it gets this thing in the winter called inversion, where because of the valleys that everyone lives in here around the Great Salt Lake, there's mountains on every side, or hills on every side. And I guess in the winter, like the cold air above, it like traps all the pollution in the valleys. So throughout the winter, like weekly, we get inversions where the smog just gets thick and it just starts drifting against the benches and the hillsides. And it's really gross. Like the air quality gets pretty bad here in Utah, which is not something that I expected. So coming from Washington, where there's a lot of industry and there's the ports and you've got a lot more people, I was expecting pollution to be worse in Washington, but surprisingly, because of inversion, it's way worse here. The air quality is awful, unless there's a storm coming through to filter it out. So that's something that I've been having to get used to. It's really gross, and you can just see it, like from where I live, and you can see straight down the metro area, straight down the valley. You just see it start building and moving this way. So one thing I've noticed is almost everyone that I've met, whether it's the neighbors or just people you run into at stores or employees, you know, in retail, it doesn't matter where you go, unless you're talking drivers. But when you're actually meeting people in person, everyone is so friendly. And that is not something that I'm used to. Like, yeah, people were friendly in Washington. Like, everyone here in Utah is just friendly. They will ask you how your day is, and they really want to know. They are genuine when they wish you a good day. And they really care about how you're feeling, and they want to just talk and have conversation. And all the neighbors are just really friendly, and they really care. And like the first time meeting them, it wasn't just like, oh, hey, we're the new neighbors, you know, like knock on the door. Like, people just want to invite you into their houses. So I know what you all really want to know. You want to know about the Mormons. Yes, there are a lot of Mormons in Utah. Most of the state, I think nowadays it's about 2/3 of the state are Mormon. So I've seen a lot of Mormons. There are Mormon churches or tabernacles or whatever you call them, literally on every corner. There are so many in my small town alone. It is ridiculous. And of course, in the bigger cities, they have these gigantic temples all over the place, which they are beautiful. I will give them that. They are very beautiful structures, but it's just ridiculous just how many religious structures there are here. And I'm not Mormon, and I know a lot of people. I was nervous about this moving here, wondering how Mormons would treat non-Mormons living in Utah, because I'd heard so many horror stories, and I've watched similar videos as to the one that I'm making, where people have talked about how they never felt like they fit in because of Mormons and not being Mormon, and like this clash of cultures. But I haven't experienced that. Everyone has just been so welcoming and so friendly, and no one seems to care that I'm not Mormon. You know, no one's treated me differently because of it. No one's really asked even. It's just, they just welcome me as someone new to the community, and I just really haven't felt that. No one's tried to convert me yet. I don't know if it depends on where you live in Utah, but I'm really not feeling that cultural divide that a lot of people have experienced. Everyone is just welcoming, and I don't know, we'll just have to see if it stays that way. Another thing that I just have to say is we visited the Great Salt Lake and Antelope Island when we were here last summer visiting. The Great Salt Lake is disgusting. There are so many flies and bugs on the lake, and it stinks. It's just disgusting. I don't know why people come to see it, because it is gross. So another thing that's kind of humorous is all of northern Utah, we have this mountain range called the Wasatch Mountains. And it's right up along the metro area. So like from right here, they're just a few miles away. You can get there in 5 to 10 minutes to the edge of the mountains, right? And I'm calling them mountains right now in this video because that is the official name for them. But most of the time in casual conversation, I just refer to them as hills. And people have actually corrected me and my family when we've talked about it, saying like, oh, you mean the mountains when we say hills. But here's the thing, like here in Utah, yes, they're beautiful, they're tall, They're like 8,000 to 10,000 feet tall in this part of Utah. But you're starting at an elevation of 4,000 feet to 5,000 feet. And to me, these are more like hills than mountains. Whereas in Washington, I lived at an elevation of 500 feet above sea level. And from my house, I could see 14,000 foot Mount Rainier towering over everything. That is a mountain. So these are just like the hills in the Cascade Mountains in Washington. And people really take offense to me calling them hills. Like that Utah, you don't mess with their mountains. They are very serious about them. And when I was explaining that a lot of the mountains in Washington are actually taller and have more prominence, people were taking offense to that. So don't call them hills. I'm going to keep calling them hills because that's what they are. But people here really love their mountains, and they will correct you if you call them hills, at least from my experience. So I know I didn't touch on everything. This was just a video about my experiences so far living in Utah. And I would love to do a part 2 later on, once I've lived here longer, to really touch on what it's like living in Utah. Because I haven't really been here that long, so I haven't experienced a lot of the things that I know others have experienced. But so far I will say that Utah is so different from Washington, but I am enjoying it here. I do like it here. Everyone's very friendly. It is still beautiful in its own way. So I will say that Utah is a very great place to live so far in my experience. Everyone here is so friendly. There's a lot of community groups and opportunities to get involved. And it's not something I've taken a lot of advantage of yet, but I'm going to try to get more involved in my community and meet new people. I am excited moving forward to see what Utah has in store for me. Thank you for watching today's video. I wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about. I had a few bullet points written down for some things that I wanted to mention, but I really wasn't sure what this video would end up being like. So I hope you found it useful or interesting, and thank you for making it this far in the video. Let me know about your experiences living in Utah, or what you think about some of the things I've said in the comments. And if you did make it this far and you did watch this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you aren't subscribed already. And if you are subscribed, be sure to turn on the bell icon so that you're notified for the next time that I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Charaba, and I'll see you next time.